This is the second time this week we've seen Brandon Sanderson fire shots at Hollywood. I don't know if there's a little personal animus there because of just the way that some of his projects went and then kind of disappeared over the last few years. But it's really interesting to watch him call out the Wheel of Time now that it's off the air. Something that all the fans thought the whole way. We hated the Wheel of Time adaptation because, of course, it did not do honor by the books. It didn't do anything like the books. It just tried to make this big political message the thing, which is, got Robert Jordan rolling in his grave, I'm sure, at this juncture. And, of course, it got canceled. And the minute it got canceled, he finally said something, voiced his frustration that Hollywood did not listen to him. He tried to give them notes. He tried to help them on it, just got completely shut out. And this is pretty interesting to see him just kind of pushing back on this. I've seen this trend quite a bit with authors now. We've got Sanderson doing it. We've got George R.R. Martin, who is consistently, just lambasting Hollywood for changing great fantasy works and the like when they try to put them on the screen. And until they get the message over there that, you as a Hollywood writer who picks up an IP, this isn't your work, it's somebody else's, and you are then taking that property. You don't need to subvert expectations. You shouldn't be trying to make it your own. Make your own IP if that's the case. Do honor to the lore. That's what we've always been saying this entire time, and this is pretty interesting fantasy news today, guys. Glad you're here. Please hit the like and subscribe button and join us as we talk about all things in pop culture, especially with science fiction and fantasy. I come at this from a science fiction and fantasy writing perspective myself. I've been a professional in the field for the last, when did I start? 2016, so 9 years. And this is my bestseller. It's called For Steam and Country. It's about an airship crew who is out fighting monsters, adventuring, questing, and eventually gets embroiled in this really, really heavy war, which builds up quite a bit. If you like fun characters, if you like beautiful world building, I think you're really going to enjoy this. It's in the description below. It's a 6-book series, and it's available on ebook, print, and audio so that you can check it out in whatever format you prefer. Thank you guys so much for reading and making this go. Appreciate you being there. And yes, it supports our channel. This is the best way to do so. Thank you for reading, my friends. All right. So Brandon Sanderson, author of the Mistborn series, confirmed that Hollywood script writers intentionally pitch IP projects so they can use them as skin suits to tell their own stories. We've known this for a lot of years, but of course he knows this from actually talking with people inside the industry. Now, he actually had a couple of his projects in development at studios for a while, and I watched over the last couple of years as he was hyping them. Suddenly he doesn't talk about them anymore. And it's because they all just got squashed. We all saw what happened when Rings of Power came out, when Wheel of Time came out. They weren't particularly successful for the level of IPs that they were. And of course, Brandon Sanderson's not quite anywhere near where those properties are in terms of their fame and the like. Game of Thrones was kind of bucking that trend a little bit, but towards the end, of course, fans turned on it, and that didn't help at all. Now, Brandon has given interviews referencing how he thinks Marvel going off the rails actually was a large part of it as well, because you've got this sprawling, interconnected multiverse thing. That's what Brandon's got going in fantasy books. That's not going to play well in the market. Eventually, people get fatigued on that. Now, I don't know that people get fatigued on that concept at all, directly, but I think it's just the fact that Hollywood doesn't execute it very right, and that's exactly what Brandon's kind of alluding to right here. So let's get into this as we talk about what he's saying. So in a post to the Lord of the Rings memes subreddit in October, he shared an anecdote about how one of his lesser-known stories, The Emperor's Soul, was optioned for a Hollywood project. Which I like that book quite a bit, by the way. After explaining how the writer for the project was the one who pitched it and eventually convinced the studio to option the rights, Brandon revealed when he eventually got his hands on the script, it was nothing like the novel, and described it as one of the most bizarre experiences of my life. And I mean, you guys as fans, I'm sure you've seen this. Let's look at the Shannara MTV show. That was a disaster on that level too, right? Everybody forgets that one. But they change things. They try to make it into something it's not and just use the brand name for credibility. That's what it is. The characters' names were largely the same, though nothing that happened to them was remotely similar to the story. Emperor's Soul is a small-scale character drama that takes place largely in one room, with the discussions of the nature of art between two characters who approach the idea differently, he shared, which is true. And by the way, that would make for a compelling web or TV series. And this is the type of thing that, if you've written something like this, maybe produce it yourself. Brandon, you've got the finances at this point. You've got the backing. That's not a hard one to do. because it is largely set in one room, so the budget doesn't have to be that big for it. So it's pretty interesting on that level. The screenplay detailed an expansive fantasy epic with new love interest for the main character, a pirate captain. They globetrotted, they fought monsters, they explored a world largely unrelated to mine, save for a few words here and there. Interesting. Next, Sanderson explained why the script was so different from his novel. Hollywood doesn't buy spec scripts, original ideas from screenwriters very often. That's right. And they never buy spec scripts that are an epic fantasy. Those are too big, they're too expensive, they're too daunting. And if they are the sorts of stories where the producers and executives need proof of an established book series to justify the production, because the fan base will come in on that, is the theory. Now, here, this writer never had a chance to tell his own epic fantasy story, so he wanted to. Instead, he found a popular-ish story that nobody had snatched up and used it as means to tell the story he'd always wanted to tell because he'd never otherwise had a chance of getting it made, he shared. So Brandon Sanderson then concluded this was not a one-time deal. This is a major problem within Hollywood, and many issues affecting this, our so-called adaptations, are currently being made. I'm convinced this is part of an issue with some of these adaptations. Screenwriters, directors are creative, and they want to tell their own stories, but it's almost impossible to get these made in the fantasy genre unless you're a huge established name like, of course, James Cameron. And if this is interesting as this is going on, because we just learned that Joe Abercrombie was picked up by James Cameron, and they're actually going to be adapting one of his novels, which is very, very interesting. So I'm not saying they all do this deliberately, as a screenwriter did for my work, but I think there's an unconscious influence. I think they want to tell their stories. This is an allowed method, so given the chance at freedom, they go off the rails. The execs don't know a genre or property well enough to understand why this can lead to disaster. Sanderson is not the only one to point this out. Of course, Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves directors admitted they did this when promoting their film. They said, to be able to do the kind of storytelling at a level you want to do you feel you have a franchise versus writing original story? And this is what they said. Goldstein, interesting. I won't notice anything. Using existing IP certainly greases the wheels. Any meetings we have with studio heads out with, here's 4 things we have got interest. To some extent, I think we use intellectual property as a bit of costume to get ourselves in the door. We're going to make the movie what we want to make. It just makes it a bit easier to get going if something that people are very familiar with. Now, Honor Among Thieves really didn't feel like Dungeons & Dragons and did not really feel like it had any of its establishment right there. It just felt like a fantasy film, which was kind of cheeky and the like, which if it wasn't named Dungeons & Dragons, I watched it. I think I would have really pretty much enjoyed it. It's just sad that Hollywood feels the need to do this all the time. Now, Lord of the Rings of Power also noted they were planning to write the book Tolkien never wrote, despite the fact the show is set in the Second Age. Showrunner says, can we come up with the novel Tolkien never wrote and do it as a mega event series that can only happen now? And this is what happened with Roar of the Rohirrim on that level, too. I mean, you see this all the time. This is a big, big deal, and it's happening across Hollywood. That's what's being done with these IPs. Even stuff like Star Trek, if you look at it right now with Alex Kurtzman, what he does with everything, his entire pitch every single time is not to write a Star Trek show where they're exploring strange new worlds and not just following the continuity of that. It's always like, okay, let's do this like Star Trek, but The Office. Yeah, that's what they're pitching right now, guys. They literally want a live-action comedy show like The Office, and they're going to just window dress it with Star Trek. They try to make Star Trek for people who don't like Star Trek to try to chase these modern audiences and make a name for themselves, making it their own thing rather than actually just doing what they should. Now, Seth MacFarlane already did kind of a live-action comedy of Star Trek. He called it The Orville, and it was his own property. And, it has its flaws, but for the most part, it actually feels more like Star Trek than anything they've produced in a long, long time. And he did it with his own intellectual property, and I like that. It makes it feel a lot better, right? And that's just interesting to see how we see this with Hollywood. Now, as I said, I already covered this earlier this week about what he said about Wheel of Time, which is very similar to this, that they were just ignoring his notes. Now, he's one of the guys who wrote the books. Why would you ignore those notes? That's stupid of them. That's exactly what they did. I think the Hollywood writers, there's just so many streaming shows. There's so many shows. There's not a lot of people with creative talent that really are at the level of a lot of authors out there who actually write books and do this just because they care about the stories and it's their own imaginations. And so this is just kind of what happens. They want to push their own stuff. They don't have the creativity to do so, and it flops every single time because fans really, really despise it. And if you turn off the fans, you've turned off everybody. Leave a comment down below with what you think about this. Please hit the like and subscribe button. Really appreciate you guys for being there. And also check out my For Steam and Country. I've made out my own beautiful fantasy series. I would love to see this made into something. In fact, I'd even do like a toned down version of it because they are traveling around the world. So that would be a kind of big budget sort of item. I'll have to think about how that would be done. Interesting stuff. But I think you'll love it. It's fun fantasy. It's swashbuckling. It's optimistic. It's, I'm trying to push back against just like the grimdark that's everywhere these days. And that's what we're doing here. So enjoy it. Thanks, guys, for reading. It's in the description below. Let me know what you think about Brandon Sanderson's comments. I think he's spot on. And appreciate you being there and tuning in for the fantasy news. Hit the like and subscribe button. We'll be back.